My name is Larry Ivory. I'm the President and CEO of the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce, the largest black trade organization in the state of Illinois. We're here for our annual lobby day where we come down to Springfield with members all across the state of Illinois to talk about policies, legislation that can hurt us, legislation that we oppose, to make sure that we engage in the political process, because we know politics impacts businesses. So we do this every year. We also meet with heads of agencies like IDOT, Department of Transportation, CMS, HFS. All the heads of agencies sit down and talk about how they can improve the opportunities for African Americans. We also meet with legislators, the Black Caucus, the governor, and we also have a reception that we host where we just get a chance to network with business people and leadership from around the state to just talk and work together on how do we make Illinois a better place for everybody, especially for African Americans. Some of you may or may not know, there are thousands and thousands of pieces of legislation that comes through Springfield. And like most of us, no one's tracking 3,000 pieces of legislation here, right? So we have a disadvantage because in most cases, legislation can be there to hurt you or help you. In some cases, that legislation can hurt you, but if you don't have people down here that represents that interest, then they can pass something because it did not have input from the black business community that can hurt us or can hurt your industry. So that's why it's so fundamentally important for us to be down here and to make sure that we engage. Now, the downside to this piece, ladies and gentlemen, is that it takes a lot of money, time, and energy to track all legislation. And so we have initiated an investment that we're going to be making into this that Tyler's going to talk about a little bit later in terms of how do we pull together a team of people who work on policy. So we're going to focus on that as a part of our future goals and objective of the organization. When we talk about Department of Transportation, right now there's a big debate in Springfield on what? Passing an infrastructure bill. Now the problem with the infrastructure bill is that we're for it, but we want to make sure that we're included in it. And normally what they're probably going to do, in most guesses, is that they're going to probably put a gas tax, which means that if they pass a gas tax, then their cost of going to the gas pump is going to be a little bit higher. Now, when you can go to a pump, and you can see a lot of black people buying gas, but the question is, when you drive up and down the highway, do you see a lot of black people doing the construction work? Now, can anyone raise their hand when they say, I'm driving down the highway and I see 20 black people working on highway construction? Can anyone go and say, when I go to the gas station, I see a lot of black people buying gas? Well, that's how infrastructure is funded. We have to make sure that our voices are heard with our legislators to make sure they write us in and don't write us out. Because we're going to pay for it, and if we're going to pay for it, we have a right to participate where our dollars help create the opportunity. The other thing that's out there being debated today is on recreational marijuana, because we know that the state has some real fiscal challenges when it comes to their budget. And so they're looking for revenue sources. One of the revenue sources they've identified has been the legalization of recreational marijuana. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it is not the issue today. What's really important today is that we have to make sure that we're written into it, that when we take a look at all the people who are incarcerated, a lot of us are incarcerated for marijuana. And the reality of it is now, people are going to benefit from it economically, and it would be a tragedy, in our opinion, that this legislation passes and we haven't challenged the Black Caucus and others to make sure that there's a legitimate opportunity for us who have been marginalized and minimized by what's happened in this particular area. So I hope you agree with the leadership of the chamber. We have to make sure that our legislators understand it's not just passing this legislation, we want to be included in this legislation. So when you talk to your legislator today, you want to tell them that that we want to make sure that we're included at some level into this legislation. The other thing that's been talked about is Las Vegas type gambling. And whether we like it or not, it could happen. But if it's going to happen, we should be what? We should be included. So if it's going to happen, we got to make sure that we talk to our legislators and make sure that there is some opportunity for people of color to have an opportunity to participate in those opportunities. Those are just three of the things that are fundamentally critical to us right now. This informational census, there's some other legislation that we can talk about, because normally we have a pretty long legislative agenda of things we support and things we're going to be against. Today, we're going to focus on meeting with the heads of agencies, heads of states, and we're also going to focus on just telling our legislators about these pieces of legislation. Also, there's another piece of legislation that is in the formulation stage, and that deals with the utility companies. And you'll get more information on that later on tonight at the reception. So today we're going to have, at about 9:40, we're going to leave here and head to the Illinois Department of Transportation. For those who want to be a part of that meeting, who have a vested interest in Illinois Department of Transportation, after that meeting, we're going to be leaving, headed to the Illinois Department of Corrections, where we'll meet with the director of the Department of Corrections to talk about criminal justice reform, but also talk about inclusion in procurement, because the Department of Correction spends over $50 million a year in commissary. And how much of that commissary do you think African Americans are participating in? It's so small you can't even notice it. But how many people incarcerated look like us?
About 70%.
Okay, significant numbers. So we think that's a big issue for us to weigh in, so that's why we're going to be meeting with the Department of Corrections. So at this time, once we get through with those areas, we will have also the reception at 5:30. That will start promptly at 5:30 at the Wyndham Hotel, where we'll have refreshments, cocktails, and drinks, and hors d'oeuvres. Everything is free. I think you do have to pay for your drinks, depending on how many drinks you have. But we will convene at 5:30. We also have a part of who came with us today too. Illinois Central College has some young students who are involved in criminal justice reform. So we've asked the students from ICC that they would come and join us. So they're going to participate in a meeting with the criminal justice reform, and then they have a special meeting for them. So I want to give them a hand for coming out. And
my sole role today is to make sure that your experience here will make you go home and tell people that this is why we go to Lobby Day every single year. If you are going to IDOT, that will be our first meeting. If you are going to the Department of Corrections meeting, you will be here. You will stay here, and what you will do is you will lobby. We talked about some legislation that you should be going after and talking to your legislators on.
Okay, so the point of this is to make sure that our voice is actually heard. The way to do that is we have to understand there's going to be issues. There are going to be issues that we're going to talk about that we feel passionate about. Our passion needs to show, but we need to also make sure that we articulate the message. Because if we're arguing or we have argumentative state, people shut down. And so as we're looking at this, please be informed about the issue. There might be personal instances that you have that you can say personal examples, but let's not really be on personal agendas, because if we work on our collective agenda, we're going to get more things done. And so let's make sure that we're talking about the things that we need to talk about. We talk about the things that we're informed about. We do give our opinions, but more importantly than that, if we have facts and statistics go a long way. Larry wanted me to talk about our policy team. So what we have initiated is we're going to have a policy team that will be starting up. With the policy team, we've identified somebody to be a senior policy director, and that person will start to build out folks to look at the different legislation that's coming through. And so when we come to Lobby Day this time next year, we'll be very well versed on what types of things are on the agenda, what stages they're in, and then to be able to help us all with our opinion, whether we're opposed to legislation, whether we support legislation, or we're neutral to legislation. So we'll be seeing a lot more of that coming out in the next couple of months as we finish up funding this thing.
The appropriate meeting. Remember that if you're not going to the IDOT meeting and you're going to be here, we want you to go and talk to your state rep and state senator about different issues like infrastructure, about making sure we're included in the opportunities with infrastructure, make sure we're included with opportunity on the recreational marijuana and also on the gaming side. So make sure that you go and talk to your legislators about the things that are important to you.
I don't know. I don't think if I'm not mistaken. That's right. That's right. I need to say something tonight. I'm going to give him a
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Larry, appreciate you coming. Good looking crowd. I'm glad you guys came over this year annual trip. It's one of the days I usually wait for other part. I know some of you might not know me or my staff. My name is Omar Osman. And just about a couple months ago, I get to be appointed as the acting secretary by the government. I'm privileged, and I simply say I'm living a dream. I hope to do good for the state of Illinois. I hope to do good for the DBEs and minority communities. That's a commitment for me, and that is something I have carried on through my 30 years of work with IDOT. I've been around for 3 decades now.
Can you give us your title again?
Acting Secretary of Transportation. So with that, I wanted to do just a quick round of introduction. Starting with Director Lodi here.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Paul Lodi. I'm the Director of Highways here at IDOT.
Larry Ivory, President CEO of the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce.
Arthur Gass, President of the Black Chamber of Commerce of Lake County. Robert Beck, Chicago Sales.
I'm sorry, Chicago.
Robert Beck.
Okay.
Chicago Services.
Aaron Berg, Creative Capital. Will Whitaker, Senior Business Manager, Millhouse Engineering.
Aaron Chess, college student at Western Illinois.
Sam Hobson, DBE contractor with Illinois Department of Transportation.
Mike Sutton, President of Infrastructure Engineering.
Matt McGallis, Chief of Staff, IDOT.
Pam Simon, Director of BWD, IDOT.
Tony Scroggins, owner of TeachMeToFlip.com, which is a real estate investing company. I teach people how to flip real estate.
I'm Anthony Holloway, a member of the Black Chamber Chair. Yes.
Grayson Augustus, Element Services.
Cassandra Manson with Livewire Construction, Business Development.
Where at?
Livewire Construction in Calumet.
Calumet.
Park.
Yeah, I'm Tori London. I'm assisting Mrs. Illinois for the day.
Marnie Robinson, Mrs. Illinois International, and I'm very happy to be here to learn.
Tina Augustus, President of Elevate Services and the Chamber Board.
Larry Fuller, Eagle Rock Insurance of Peoria, Illinois.
Frank Nixon, Insight Financial Group.
Good morning. My name is Charles Farrell II, the President and CEO of the IT Architect Corporation, also I'm the Chairman of the IT Committee for the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce.
I'm Lord Mike, Marketing and Communications Director for the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce.
I'm Teresa Haley, State President for the NAACP and an employee here at IDOT.
Lydia Lewis, Director of Small Business Development, Black Chamber of Commerce, Lake County.
Randy McIntyre, Excel Screen Printing and Embroidery.
Kim Woods, DBE, C3 Plus, Distributor for Facility Supplies and Equipment, also a member of the Chamber's Illinois Tollway Program.
Danielle Ruffin, President, Bright Choice Security Services.
Linda Dillon Taylor, Policy and Systems Manager for the Homework Hangout Club, which is a training institute located in Decatur, Illinois. We specialize in construction areas of plumbing, carpentry, electrical, and painting.
Tori Davis, Business Services Manager for Illinois Department of Employment and Security.
Carl Holloway, Director of May Community Outreach, Peoria.
Well, again, guys, we'd like to thank the Secretary. Omar and I go back a long ways, but he was just a
When I had hair.
Yeah. And like you said, you never know what life has in store for you. And Omar has obviously reached the pinnacle of success as being the acting Secretary of Transportation. And Omar and I have worked together over the years. So we again applaud you, Omar, for doing the right things and putting yourself in the position. And we applaud your staff and your team for what you guys do. Today I'd like to just kind of set the tone for what we want to try to do, because we only have a little time for our next meeting that we have to get to. But what we would like to try to accomplish, Mr. Secretary, is to have a conversation on a number of things, but walk away with maybe 4 items that we kind of agree that's important that we can work on, and make this not the first meeting or the last meeting, but an ongoing meeting. And so what we want to give for everyone here in this meeting is kind of everyone's email. So when we walk away from the meeting today, we'll kind of have 4 or 5 things that we say we want to work on because we think this will help improve minority participation, specifically focus on African American participation. And so what we'll do is maybe listen to kind of some of the things that you guys got going, Omar, and then we'll kind of open it up for a number of things that we think are important. Mike is probably in Millhouse, and we'll talk about the professional service side, but then we'll talk about the things that we think we see from the chamber that we need to work on from our perspective, and then from there we'll have a little more dialogue, and then we will, at that point in time, remove ourselves and get to the next meeting, and then follow back up with your team, Omar, to make sure that we're staying focused and that we report back to the team in terms of how we're moving forward and progressing on a number of key items. So at this time, I think I'll yield to your team to talk a little bit about any new initiatives that you want to share with us, and then we'll kind of give you a couple of things that we'd like to see us focus in on, and then from there we'll open it up for more questions. Yield to Mike, then on the professional service side, and then we'll be a good day.
To start off, right now, and for the last few weeks, we have been working on the capital bill. We all talk about a capital bill. There's a positive atmosphere out there. Our infrastructure, when I talk about infrastructure, I'm not just referring to highways and bridges. I'm talking about the transit system we have up north specifically, and the Metro East. I'm talking about Metro, I'm talking about CTA, I'm talking about Blue Line, Red Line. All that is part of our transportation system. Also, we do have airport engineering we do out of Springfield Airport here. We have a unit that handles about 73 airports, other than O'Hare and Midway. Everything else, all the work that's, construction work that's being done at all these smaller airports, whether it's Peoria, Bloomington, Champaign, and other smaller ones, is still being handled by the Department of Transportation. Our needs to even maintain what we have is massive. We have a lot of programs some of you are aware of, and we are thinking beyond that too. I'm going to ask Pam if you could talk a little bit about some of the programs quickly that we already have in the books, and some of the other.
We have our supportive services that helps on IDOT projects. If you're thinking about bidding on a job, we actually have technical and management to help. We also, and I'm not sure how many of your folks are taking advantage of the reimbursement program, where if you're a contractor, you're one of ours, you want to belong to the Illinois State Black Chamber, we will reimburse you up to $500 in your dues to that organization if you submit your invoice. And really have
We're not taking advantage of that.
Huh?
Hey, no, we're not taking advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, they're just not, and I mean, we talk about wherever we go, and I have the little postcard things, you know, I hand out everywhere, and people just aren't. So there's a lot of things like that that we do that we're continuing on. We're doing the Resource Center in District 1, because we kind of lost our favorite spot where we were at UIC wasn't compatible for us. So we're expanding and we're doing that. I'm hoping to have an open house next month at that location where you can go in and get your technical and management help, give you plans, sit down with an actual engineer, put together a bid.
Hey, Omar, going back to the infrastructure bill, because the chamber fundamentally agrees with infrastructure and getting the capital bill passed, and we surely can lend our support across the state as a statewide organization. But one of the big challenges for us is that, and for everybody else, is how are you going to fund it?
Right.
Okay, and I know there's a lot of debate on how we fund it. We're going to toss around an increase in gas tax as a means of funding the piece. But what we're probably want to focus in on is that if we support it and put our full energy behind it throughout the state and with our media team and everything else, we think we can help in a positive way, because people are going to resist any increases in taxes no matter what you say. But the benefit is that it stimulates the economy and it does a lot of other things that makes good business sense. Where we probably have our big issues that we need to be assured, just like anything else, is that like the Boston Tea Party, we don't want taxation without representation.
Right.
We got to make sure of how do we make sure that we're written in and assurances, and I think that's going to be the key. If IDOT and the legislators want the community to really be a champion for this, the community has to see how it really benefits, because when we drive up and down the highway sometimes, we don't see as much diversity as we would like to see. And so that's going to be a critical issue. So if there's any comments to that of how we make sure that happens, that's important. Then we'd like to kind of ask kind of the things that we think are important, and then we'll open up to the group, and then we'll yield to Mike.
Absolutely. I think one of the neglected part is small business enterprise initiative we have within the department. It's a smaller program, but with the capital bill, we need to be concentrating on doing the maximum for that program, so it will go to the small business contracts. It's got to be isolated, and it's got to be something that's substantial. That's one. The other side of it, there's a lot of work typically our DB contractors do, and it becomes part of a bigger contract. I think you and I talked about the idea of we do a lot of side work, but within a bigger contract to go to comply with the American Disability Act. That type of work is very popular with our DBEs, but it's always part of a bigger contract. What we might need to do is look at contracts that are strictly just side works. We don't necessarily have to do the work of pavement on the roadway, but we could take blocks within each and every city that's not in compliance today. This is whether it's on a local system or a state system, specifically a state system, and make contracts out of that. The city of Chicago have done it a couple of times. We did it in District 1 a couple of times, but we need to expand these kind of standalone contracts that lend themselves to the contractors. This is one area that we should concentrate on, and it should be written as part of that capital bill. We should have a portion of that capital bill right up dedicated to DB. It's got to.
Well, I think from the strategy side, and I'm going to not talk a whole lot, but from a strategy side, I think if we want to get this thing done and get it passed, we're going to need help from everybody to get it done. And we surely want to be supportive of it because it makes good business sense. But we also got to be realistic about our participation. And I think there ought to be some concentration, and maybe we can make some recommendations as to some things that we think that can be done within the confines of the FHWA, because we know that the difference between federal highway and the oversight that they have in terms of what you can and can't do. we're old students of that. We go
Yeah.
back a long way. So let us kind of cover the 3 or 4 issues that we like to put on the table, because the chairman has met on this issue. It's not new to us, but so we like to kind of give you a couple of things that we think are important from our side. Number one, because everyone here is not in the construction business, some are coming to learn and understand. One of our big challenges across the board, ladies and gentlemen, is that the way that the system works is that a DBE means everybody, which means that you can meet your DBE goal by using 100% women, and you don't have to use Hispanic or African American, or you can do 100% African American, which I love to see that. That doesn't happen. But you don't have to, everyone's not included, you just have to meet the goal. We've been pushing for as long as I can remember, and we took a real swipe at it years ago with a separation of goals that allows us under 24 CFR to do a pilot program. We would surely think that just based upon the numbers that we see, Omar, and to your team, that we'd like to revisit that in a real serious fashion and get a team together to really understand what's the resistance, if there's any resistance, but if it's not, we'd like to work on that as a part of an objective, because we think if we can do a pilot program that we can improve the African American numbers across the board. We think that's essential to improving the numbers, because the numbers are the numbers, when the numbers say what we're doing, and so we'd like to improve that. The other thing that's really big for us is that the EEO officers are essential, very critical, and they play a significant role in terms of helping to set the goals. We noticed that in Peoria, due to the drop in minority contracts, that the goals have come down significantly. Felicia is there, but the goals have dropped. And they've dropped because of availability and capacity. So it means our business are going out of business, they're not sustaining themselves. They're closing their doors and deciding to do something else for a living because they're not making money. If they were making money, they probably wouldn't be closing their doors. What we want to see is make sure that the EEO officer has independence to be able to do their job without oversight of everybody else with the district, because we think there's a conflict with the EEO officer if he has to report directly to the district. Okay. So we recommend that as a recommendation. Also, there are other things that we're going to talk about from the engineering side, but those are 2 of the issues. I'll come back with a couple more, but I'm going to kind of open it up to any other questions that the team has about anything else that's really fundamentally important to them in terms of how we improve. And I'll yield to Reverend Gass, who's used to be our chairman of the board, but he's a legend throughout the state. Waukegan, he has a street named after him, and he hasn't even passed away yet. So they don't really get that when he passed away. So we'll yield to Reverend Gass and any suggestions he has.
Yeah, Omar, one of the things I have is that several years ago, you all had a program for the engineering technicians program, which you ran through the local colleges. We ran 2 sessions up in Lake County in Waukegan. Are you all looking at doing that because of if you get the capital bill passed, which I think you are going to need more infusion of engineering tech. So do you look at the possibility of doing that program again, because it was very successful?
And it was. Right now, the number of employees, the head count, or the limit, we are approaching the available head count. We are hiring, yes, engineers and technicians, new ones, because we lost a lot of people too at the same time. The 2-year program you're talking about, or is that the 10-class program?
It was the 10-week program that we did at the local college.
At the local college. Yeah, we're still hiring from the local colleges at the 2-year program, though. If they have pre-engineering or pre-engineering technology, we're still making that available. The other side of it is we had a little bit of an issue as a department on the personnel side from years ago, where we have a federal monitor who's in charge of us right now. That doesn't, they're not telling us not to hire engineers and technicians. It's just the process is different from what we used to do in the past. that is slowing our momentum down just a little bit. It's still moving forward, but everything we do, I mean, as far as hiring, we have to go and get the okay from this federal monitor. Even our engineers coming out of college, the numbers where they're going to be located. So that's a side issue. It's not stopping us from hiring people. But the 2-year program in colleges, I do remember that. That was a few years back, and that's something we absolutely want to look at.
Any other particular questions from the group as it relates to minority participation, how we improve that?